Hey friends, welcome back to the Life of a Doctor vlog. In this video, I'll take you through 2 pretty standard days of my working and personal life, and we'll try our best to squeeze in moments of studying and productivity wherever we can. On day 1, I'm rotated to be on the Maternity Day Assessment Unit, where pregnant women over 24 weeks come to get assessed if they have any issues like bleeding, pain, reduced fetal movements, stuff like that. This starts at 9 AM, so I drive to work, grab a cheeky latte on the way, and realize that we've got no patients to see this morning. And so at 9:20, I head over to the Obstetrics and Gynecology Junior Doctor's office and make a start on studying respiratory physiology. In the first instance, I'm reading through the lecture notes, and as usual, at every point, I'm asking myself, firstly, does this make sense? And secondly, could I explain this to a 5-year-old? Fairly early on, I come across this idea that the lungs in the chest wall are kind of like a pair of balloons in an airtight chamber. There's a line in the lecture notes that says, the balloons expand until the negative pressure in the vessel is equal to the elastic recoil forces of the balloons. This doesn't immediately make sense to me, and so I spend a few minutes Googling why balloons expand under negative pressure conditions and come up with a reasonably satisfying answer that I'd hopefully be able to explain to a 5-year-old, which hopefully shows that I understand the topic. As I'm going through the lecture notes PDF on Notability on my iPad Pro, I'm highlighting different bits in different colors. If you've seen my original evidence-based study tips video, you'll know that highlighting is generally considered an ineffective study technique because it's way too passive and doesn't require any brain power. And yeah, if I were just highlighting this stuff and thinking, yep, I'm going to remember that, that would be a fool's errand because there's absolutely no way I'm going to remember stuff just because I've highlighted it. Instead, I'm highlighting stuff with the intention that when I look over these lecture notes later today, I'll immediately be able to spot things that I can turn into flashcards or questions for my students. For example, in pink, I'm highlighting examinable facts that might lend themselves to flashcards. For example, that the pressure between the visceral and parietal pleura is -5 centimeters of water. That value, -5 centimeters of water, isn't really based on having a first principles understanding of what's going on in the lungs. It's just one of those numbers that you have to know, and knowing it helps you understand what's going on during the breathing cycle. Equally, during inspiration, i.e. breathing in, this pleural pressure falls from -5 to -8 centimeters of water. Again, this is an examinable fact, something that lends itself to memorization with active recall and spaced repetition, and so I'm highlighting it in pink to make a question or flashcard out of it later. In light blue or indigo, I'm highlighting things that are interesting or insightful. I find that this works best for subjects that we're already familiar with, so that when we're revising them, most of the information isn't new, but occasionally we'll come across something interesting or insightful, and that's worth highlighting so we can spot it at a glance when we're looking at our notes next. But I remember back to first and second year of medical school when all this information was new to me, and I ended up practically highlighting the whole page in different colors, and I feel that's a lot less useful. With highlight, the point is to be able to spot things at a glance when you're next looking at them, so less is usually more. And finally, in purple, I'm highlighting stuff that I don't immediately understand. So this is what I do until 10 AM when I stop to make sure that I haven't been bleeped in this time, check some emails, and pay last year's income tax to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which ends up being a distressingly significant hit to my current account. Oh well. At 10:38, I look at the time, utterly amazed at how quickly time flies when you're procrastinating from studying, and get back to respiratory physiology. For the first 15 minutes, I continue to read through the notes, trying to jog my memory of all these concepts and trying to understand what's going on. Then, when I get to a new section about elastic properties of the lung and chest wall, I realize that I've sort of lost the forest from the trees, and I switch over to Notion to do what I should have done at the start of this study session and made an outline of the lecture notes, just so I have an idea of where stuff fits in. Having made this outline, I get back to the lecture notes and to understanding compliance, elasticity, and pressure volume curves of the lung and chest wall. This is stuff that I haven't really revisited since my first year of medical school 7 years ago, and so it takes a long time for me to grapple with the concepts in my head, even talking out loud at points to try and get my head around what's going on. Thankfully, there was no one in the office to watch me doing this. I realized that I don't quite understand what's happening just by reading the lecture notes, i.e. I wouldn't be able to explain it to a 5-year-old, and so I find some YouTube videos exploring those concepts further and watch bits of them at double speed, of course, to try and get to the insights that I'm looking for. By 11:43 AM, my mind begins to feel frazzled, which isn't surprising because I've been going for a solid hour without a break. And so I park this topic of lung and chest wall compliance and head to the hospital cafe for lunch. I grab myself a super healthy tuna and cheese toastie with chips, and because I have no friends, I go back to the doctor's office to eat, rather than sit on my own on a table alone in the hospital canteen which I feel people would judge me for, even though actually they probably wouldn't. While I'm eating, I watch through some more YouTube videos explaining lung and chest wall compliance, but then one of the other doctors comes in and we end up chatting about my lack of healthy eating habits, and she gives me some pretty legit advice on how to cook for myself. Then I get called to see a patient in the late pregnancy assessment unit, which takes around half an hour to sort out, and then I spend the afternoon with one of the consultants in the general gynecology clinic, observing consultations and helping with examinations. At 5 p.m, I drive home, grab coffee with some fans from 6 to 7 p.m, play some badminton from 7 to 9 p.m, and then for around 20 minutes when I get home, I eat my microwave meal in bed while going through the respiratory physiology lecture slides to make sure I understand them. When studying properly, I'd normally be doing something active like active recall rather than just rereading slides. But firstly, I definitely don't have the energy at this point to actually engage my brain properly, and thankfully I'm not actually preparing to take an exam just yet. So I don't need to worry too much about committing stuff to memory, I just need to make sure I understand it. At 9:30 p.m, some friends come over to chat and sing songs, and then at 11 p.m, I head into bed, write out the script for this video, write a diary entry in the app Day 1 where I keep a somewhat regular journal, and head to bed. The following day is significantly less productive. I wake up at 7:30, drive to the hospital for a simulation day where we do different medical emergency scenarios on a fake patient to improve our leadership, teamwork, and staying cool under pressure skills. After work, I give a talk at the Cambridge Career Service about marketing and communication for some reason, and then I get home to start studying at 8 p.m. I set the kettles to boil and take one look at my desk and decide that I can't be bothered to deal with the effort of tidying it, and so today, like yesterday, I'm going to be studying in bed. I crawl into bed in my dark room, try to turn on the Philips Hue smart light bulbs, but find that for some reason my phone isn't connecting to the Hue bridge, and so the lights aren't working. We actually had a cleaner who came in this afternoon, and so I wonder whether he might have unplugged the Philips Hue system from the mains to plug in the Hoover or something. With this realization, I eat an orange while wallowing in self-pity for a few minutes at just how unfair life is that my smart light bulbs aren't working. At 8:05 p.m, I negotiate myself out of bed to get my cup of tea and sort the lights out. Then I crawl back into bed, set the lights to the color temperature that I want, order myself a takeaway from GBK because I've had a tough day and obviously deserve a takeaway. I set my Spotify to play Taylor Swift's very first album, and then I get to marking these essays that I have to do. The first batch of them are tackling the question, how and why does the shape of action potentials vary in different types of excitable tissue? Such a great question. After a record 35 minutes, food arrives while I'm in the middle of marking the third essay, and so I finish it off while taking a few bites of the burger. Then I realize I'm enjoying this food way too much to warrant multitasking essay marking. So instead I multitask by watching my friend Thomas Frank's new class on Skillshare. It's called Real Productivity, How to Build Habits That Last. And in the first couple of videos, he talks about how perfect is the enemy of good, which is one of my favorite Voltaire quotes of all time, and about goal setting and his impossible list. Goal setting is something I sort of struggle with myself, in that I don't really believe in setting goals. But recently I've started to have my mind change on that front, and Tom's someone who's been part of that change. He's also got an excellent class on how to create your own productivity system, and in case you didn't know, I've got my very own class on Skillshare, where I take you through the entire process of creating these very videos in Final Cut Pro. A Skillshare premium membership costs less than $10 a month, and it's totally worth the price. And they've got thousands of classes covering anything you can think of, from drawing and animation to cooking and writing. If any of that sounds up your street, do please click the link in the video description, because the first 500 people to do so will get a free 2-month trial of Skillshare in which you can watch any or all of the classes that you like. So thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. At 9:07 p.m, I resume Taylor Swift's first album on Spotify and continue marking essays. I bash through a handful that are answering the question, discuss the role of calcium ions in nerve and muscle. Taylor's first album then ends, and so at 9:40, I switch to her second album, Fearless, which is one of my favorites, and continue going through these essays. Now I'm marking a handful that are aiming to answer the question, how does the cardiovascular system respond to exercise? There's a quick point I want to make here about the pink highlighting that I was doing earlier. So if you recall, if you watched the beginning of the video, I said that I highlight things in pink if they're potentially examinable facts, and therefore I might potentially make a flashcard out of them later. But now that I've become so familiar with respiratory physiology from kind of reading about it for the last 2 days and really trying to understand it, that initial point that I highlighted, which was the idea that, -5 centimeters of water and -8 centimeters of water in the pleural pressure, I highlighted that because I thought it might be worth turning into a flashcard. But at this point, it's so deeply ingrained in me because it's such a fundamental part of respiratory physiology that I really don't need to make a flashcard about those. And that's another point that I like to say to people, that when making flashcards, I think less is more, in that it's very tempting to just make loads and loads of flashcards for every single lecture, but then they become completely unsustainable to go through. So one way of reducing the workload is to highlight stuff initially, and then in your second pass through the lecture, you can figure out whether you still need to make a flashcard out of it. And if that's the case, then make the flashcard, and if not, then you don't bother because you know the thing already. Anyway, it takes another 50 minutes to get through all these essays, and so by the end of it, it's 10:30, and I'm just over halfway through Fearless. My housemate Molly arrives home at that point, so I catch up with her for a bit, and then lie in bed intending to read some more physiology in preparation for tomorrow's supervision. But then I realize that I really can't be bothered right now, so I reason with myself that I'll just wake up early tomorrow and go over surfactant and the effect that it has on lung compliance and surface tension. I spend a few minutes doing some final typing for this video script, and then call it a night. So yeah, that's what I got up to across these 2 fairly standard consecutive days. If you've reached the end of this video, then thank you so much, you're amazing. I hope you found this glimpse into my life not a complete waste of time, so thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.